Chapter 6. The Cat Who Knew Too Much. Without warning, the sky opened and the rain came down. Lyle and Taxi ran for the shelter of their bungalows. Georgette ran to Max's, and he made no sign for her to leave. Interesting, I thought. Even more interesting was the fact that I was sitting in the middle of a pouring rain watching everyone else run for cover. "Come on, Chester," I called out. "Let's go." "Don't be ridiculous," he shouted back. "Now is the perfect time for us to investigate." "Perfect time?" I asked. "Investigate? Are you crazy? It's pouring." I know. But Max and Georgette are together, and if we're clever about it, we can eavesdrop on them without their noticing. Follow me." I didn't budge. I couldn't believe Chester wanted to play detective in the middle of a storm. I was all set to return to my bungalow, but the next words he spoke got to me. "If not for me," he said, "do it for Louise." As we approached Max's bungalow, Chester stopped and beckoned for me to bend down. He whispered, "If we could get up on the roof, we could lean over and hear everything. Give me a boost." "How am I supposed to do that?" I asked, but Chester had already jumped on my shoulders, and from there to the top of the bungalow. "Oh," I said in answer to my own question. Seeing that I had no one's shoulders to assist me, I had little choice but to take a running leap. "Softly," Chester commanded as I landed next to him with a crash. "Nice move," he commented. "I'm not as quiet as you are, Chester," I said. "I can't help it. I'm big and clumsy. Well, never mind. If they hurt us, I'll just go ho, 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 and tell them Christmas is early this year." We hung over the front of the bungalow, listening as best we could. The rain was coming down even harder now, making it almost impossible to hear what was being said inside. We couldn't see anything either, because the door was just a little lower than either of us could reach with our heads. "Listen," Chester said in a low voice. "I've got to get closer. If you hold me with your front legs, I'll be able to hang down to the top of the door and hear and see what's going on inside." Well, I wasn't sure this was such a good idea, but as you may have figured out for yourself by now, once Chester has a notion in his head, there's no arguing him out of it. Well, he's right about that. I held on to his back legs with my paws and lowered him to the front door. His tail brushed against my nose. It tickled. "Chester," I whispered as loudly as I could. "Move your tail." "What?" he whispered back. "Move your tail. It's tickling my nose." "I can't hear you, Harold. Now be quiet. I think I can make out what they're saying in there. Lower me a little more." I pushed myself forward an inch or two in order to lower Chester. With the rain coming down the way it was, the roof was getting pretty slippery, and I didn't dare go much farther. "How's that?" I called out. Chester couldn't hear me, so he didn't answer. Apparently it had worked, though, because I could see that his ears were standing up sharply, a good sign that he was able to hear something. Whatever he was hearing must have been good, because his tail started twitching like crazy. Unfortunately, it was twitching like crazy all over my nose. "Stop it!" I cried as the tears started rolling down my face. Boy, did it tickle. "Chester! Chester!" I called out. But by now the rain was really coming down, and he couldn't hear a word I said. No matter which way I turned my head, Chester's tail found my nose. "Chester, you're making me laugh!" I cried out desperately. I could feel myself starting to slip off the roof. Finally, I couldn't stand it any longer. Without realizing what I was doing, I let go of Chester's legs and grabbed his tail. He plunged downward, pulling me with him. Off the slippery roof I tumbled, holding Chester tightly by the tail. Together we landed in a jumble right in front of the door to the bungalow. Max and Georgette turned to discover us lying in a puddle at their doorstep. "Look, Max," Georgette said. "It's raining cats and dogs." She seemed to get quite a chuckle out of this, but Max hushed her immediately. "Georgette, how could you laugh at a time like this?" "But sugar, enough now," he said empathetically. "Be still." Chester glanced at me knowingly. "So," Max said, turning to us, "to what do we owe the pleasure of your, shall we say, unexpected company?" "We were just in the neighborhood, so we thought we'd drop in," Chester replied smartly. I was impressed by the quickness of his wit. I tried to think of a quick comeback, too, but it takes me a while to think of quick comebacks. By the time I was ready, Chester had already strolled into the bungalow, casually shaking out the rain from his hair as he went. I followed his lead, but when I shook the rain out of my hair, there was nothing casual about it. "Harold, sugar!" Georgette cried. "You're making it rain indoors." "Oh, sorry," I said sheepishly. "Well, it was nice of you to stop by anyway," she said then. "I guess." She looked with uncertainty at Max, who glowered at Chester and said nothing. After an awkward silence, Chester spoke. "We were sorry to hear about Louise. If there is anything we can do—" "Aw, shucks," Max said, his face softening. "That's really big of you. I mean if we can help you out in any way," Chester added with emphasis. He looked meaningful at Max. Max averted his eyes and pawed at the ground. "Oh, I doubt there's anything anyone can do," he mumbled. "We'll just hope she comes back soon, that's all. Meanwhile, I'll just have to bear my sorrows alone." Chester nodded sympathetically at Max. "Of course," he said. "We understand." And then under his breath, he muttered, "Save it for the judge." "What about me?" Georgette asked. "I'll bear it with you, Maxie." "Gee, thanks, Georgette." I noticed Chester's face out of the corner of one eye. He was taking it all in. "Well, I suppose you're right," he said. "There really isn't anything we can do. Just wanted to let you know." He paused dramatically and spoke with great intensity. "That we're here if you need us." "Right," Max said, sticking out his jaw. I gathered that for a bulldog, a stiff lower jaw was the equivalent of a stiff upper lip for the rest of us. The rain was laying up, a perfect excuse for us to take our leave. We raced back to Chester's bungalow. "Well, I couldn't hear everything," Chester said as soon as we were inside, "but what I did hear was pretty incriminating." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means it's not the kind of stuff you'd want your mother to know." "Oh." Chester bathed himself as he continued. "It seems," he said between licks, "that our friends Max and Georgette are planning to escape." "Really?" I asked. I could feel my eyebrows take on a life of their own. "Really," Chester replied. "The first voice I heard was Georgette's. She was saying something like, 'We have to stick together and everything will be all right.'" "Wow!" That's what I thought. Then Max said, "But what if we're caught?" And Georgette said, "That's why we have to be very careful. We'll go when it's dark. First, we have to find a way out." And that's all I heard. "That's too bad," I said. "Yes, it is," Chester agreed. "Unfortunately, a certain party who shall remain nameless dropped me right at that moment." "Oh," I said, swallowing. I decided not to respond further. "Well," I went on, "obviously Max and Georgette are the guilty ones. They murdered Louise, and now they're planning their getaway. Gee, it's hard to believe it's really happening. It's like something you'd read in a detective story." "Not so fast," Chester cautioned. "It doesn't look good for them, but I'm still not convinced they did it." "You're not?" I asked in surprise. "Not at all," Chester replied. "They're not the only ones with a motive. And there's still a big piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit. Until it does, I won't know for sure who the murderer is." "What's that?" I asked. "Well, Harold, I don't know about you, but I had a lot of trouble sleeping last night. Howard and Heather were howling so much, I don't think I slept at all. If anyone has walked across the compound, much less dragged a body across it, I would have known, but I didn't see or hear anything. All night long. Doesn't that seem odd?" I had to admit that it did. "What do you make of it?" I asked Chester. "I don't know what to make of it," he confessed. "Well, whoever did it didn't want to get wet, so they waited for the rain to let up," I suggested. "But that would mean early this morning, when it was light already." "Nope, it would have been too risky." "Then it had to be last night." Chester was deep in thought. "Yes," he murmured softly. "Yes, last night." Suddenly his eyes lit up. I was aware that at that moment the rain stopped. It was very still when Chester uttered his next words. "That last piece of the puzzle, Harold." "Yes?" "It just fell into place," he said. "Huh?" "I just figured it out, Harold." His voice became louder and more excited. "I don't know why, and I don't completely understand how, but I know who did it. Without a doubt, I know who did it." "You know who did what?" Taxi's voice said sharply. Surprised, I turned to see Taxi, Lyle, Georgette, and Max gathered at the door of Chester's bungalow. It was Max who spoke next. Taxi tells us you and Harold are saying he murdered Louise, he said. Nonsense, Chester replied immediately. Nothing seemed to faze him. He said he overheard you talking. He may have overheard us talking, but he never heard us say he murdered Louise. You believe that Louise was murdered? Georgette asked, her eyes growing wide. How can you say such a thing? I say it because it's true, Chester replied matter-of-factly. Oh, come on, mate, Max retorted. You have an overstimulated imagination, if you ask me. Just like Lyle. I've always said that about cats. Lyle was outraged. Don't put me in the same camp as Chester, he cried. I may be crazy, but I'm not that crazy. I never accused anybody of murder. He's a troublemaker. String him up. That's what I say. Let's string him up. Hysterical, he dashed off. I presumed in search of rope. Chester stared coolly at the three who remained. Yes, he said, I know who murdered Louise. I just need a little more information. And when I have it, I'll prove my case. Max began to laugh. Go ahead and laugh, Chester snapped, cutting him off mid-chortle. Yes, my friend, laugh today, for tomorrow you'll know the truth. And then perhaps you'll never laugh again. I noticed that Howard and Heather had come up behind Taxi and were listening to what Chester had to say. I felt myself trembling as I beheld the 5 pairs of eyes staring penetratively at Chester. It was so quiet you could have heard a doggy pop drop. And then all at once, Heather threw back her head and let out an ear-splitting howl. "Ow!" she cried. Gasps of shock went out from all of us. She looked about her, an expression of great surprise on her face. Oh, sorry, she said softly. Just not myself. Oh, how embarrassing. I think I'd best rest, Howard continued. Yes, dear, I do think that's best. And off they went, their heads bobbing all the way back to their bungalows. We watched them go. Then, without a word, Max, Georgette, and Taxi followed, leaving Chester and me alone with each other and our thoughts. I looked at Chester. A cool smile sat on his lips. How can you smile like that? I asked. Don't you realize what a dangerous thing you've done? Exposing yourself like that? Now the murderer knows you've found him out. Oh, I don't think I've done such a dangerous thing, Chester answered smoothly. He was quiet then, and I remember looking at him, hoping that he was right, and feeling somewhere deep in my bones that he wasn't. He was lost in thought for the rest of the day. In fact, the only time he spoke to me again was shortly before dinner. Just one word of warning, he said. Keep awake tonight. The murderer may strike again. Remember, do not sleep. If you do, you may never wake again. How it chills me to recall those words, particularly when I think of them as Chester's last. Oh boy. What do you guys think that means? I don't like the way this chapter ended. Please join me for the next chapter. We'll find out.